to the states now, and I think what is so remarkable to so many Americans is because the Supreme Court lifted this constitutional protection that's been in effect for half a century, now you have states that are going to require 13-year-old girls, victims of rape, victims of incest, they are going to be compelled by the state to carry their rapist's baby to a forced birth. What are you planning to do in Michigan? What does the future look like for young women? Well, for all women.
It's true. And I also want to share, I shared a personal story this week on the Senate floor. There are those egregious examples. And then there's also a story like mine. After I gave birth to my daughter, I had an IUD placed, and that IUD punctured through my uterus. I had to be scheduled for a laparoscopy and a DNC to have it removed. And without access to an abortive procedure, I might not be here right now. And I have talked to women and families all over the state about how hard it is to become pregnant, how hard it is to stay pregnant safely, how often people miscarry, and it is forced pregnancy, regardless of what your doctor thinks, regardless of the situation you find yourself in, and the ramifications in Michigan. We have a 1931 law on the books, a long dormant law that makes providing abortion a felony by a minimum of 4 years of prison. And right now, the Republicans want to go even further and make that a 10-year penalty. So they want to have it both ways. They want to say, look, we don't want to go back to the 1931 law. We don't want to send doctors to jail. We don't want to send women and girls to die, and yet they're doing nothing. I have introduced the bill to pass the Reproductive Health Act into law in the state of Michigan to codify abortion access, but they don't want to take that up. We've never had a debate, and now it's too late. This is the law on our books.
And Mara Gay, let's just for a moment talk about the impact here on poor women.
I think it's important for Americans to reflect upon the fact that this is not actually about saving the lives of babies. The impact of this decision is about control over women's bodies. It's about power, and it's about a minoritarian, right-wing, extremist agenda trying to inflect their will upon the rest of us. And the people who will suffer the most, as usual, are the most vulnerable people in society. Everyone, every woman will suffer. Every woman, myself included, we have fewer rights than we had a week ago or days ago. But the people who will be the first to suffer are those who do not have the ability to travel if they need health care that includes an abortion. Those who do not have health care. Those who may not have resources or networks to get them the care that they need. This is going to have a horrible impact on women of color, especially Black women across the South, who have horrendous maternal mortality rates as is in this country. There were some projections over the weekend that this is actually going to make that worse, which is unsurprising. And it's going to have an impact on rural women. It's going to have an impact on anyone who has to drive now across multiple states in this country to get the health care to which they should be entitled as a human being.
Yeah, and of course, it is, again, the hypocrisy is extraordinary because, Maura, you certainly, you've stated it, but if any of these Republicans or if any of these senators who supported these judges, if their family members, their daughters, their loved ones needed an abortion, they could get on a plane and take them to another state. It's poor women. It's, as you said, women that are in rural areas in these southern states that are going to be trapped making horrific life or death decisions without the safety of a safe medical procedure. And, you know, Mara, it was fascinating that Clarence Thomas showed that hypocrisy in his decision. He talked about how contraception rights should be reviewed again. He talked about marriage equality, how that should be opened up. He talked about, of course, what consenting adults can do in the privacy of their bedroom. That should be taken up. But he didn't, for some reason, talk about loving. Isn't that fascinating?
Funny.
He didn't talk about interracial marriages. And I saw that. A lot of people brought that up as saying, oh, my God, why didn't he say that? I saw that as being so typical of these Republicans, these so-called pro-life Republicans, and what they would do for their own children, what they would do for their own loved ones if medically necessary, if there was a crisis. And yet what they won't do for poor women in rural states that are thousands of miles away from where they can have the safe procedure.
That's right, Joe. I mean, first of all, it's cruel. So I think we should start there. And I think the dissenting justices used the word draconian in their dissent, which was spot on. But I think what Americans are coming to realize, I was out at the protests on Friday covering them in Washington Square Park. The amount of anger is extraordinary. And the signs that you see, the protest signs, are very sophisticated. And you saw not just women or not just white women, you saw an incredibly diverse crowd of gay New Yorkers, gay Americans who had signs that said, bodily autonomy is queer liberation. Because the point is here, Americans are now coming to understand that this court, this minoritarian, fascist faction in the country, this is not about just abortion. This is about power and control. And it is about wanting to control every aspect of American life, whether it be contraception, of course, or gay rights. And it's really about imposing a really extremist view and a very archaic one of what this country is, a white Christian nationalist view of this country. And I use the word Christian loosely in this case.
Yeah, please do, because I find it so ironic, Senator. I find it so ironic that conservatives have always said, oh, Roe is an illegitimate decision, because they never mentioned abortion in the Constitution. They never mentioned abortion in the founding documents. You know where abortion also is not mentioned? In the Bible, in the Gospels. In Jesus' own words, those red words, never mentioned once. And by the way, if it were such a centerpiece of the Christian faith, stay with me, Christians, listen, Christians, if it were such a centerpiece of the Christian faith, then why did it take Baptists 1,980 years after Jesus' birth to figure out, when Ronald Reagan was running for president, that they were suddenly against abortion? Because Baptists were actually for abortion. They were pro-choice throughout the 1970s. Catholics only figured out it was the centerpiece of their religion in like the 1930s. So again, it is so preposterous. But this claim that this is somehow a victory for baby Jesus, it's just a lie, and it's a lie that's been made up over our adult lifetime. Here's a way. I'm much older than you, but here's a way to look at it. I was telling friends that were going, oh, this is the centerpiece of Christ. I said, you do understand that evangelicals were for choice, like after the Beatles broke up. Let me continue. They were for choice after the Eagles broke up. They were for choice when I was in high school. So tell me, what does this have to do with the Gospels of Jesus Christ? The answer, of course, is nothing. It's politics, politics, politics.
And it gets into the bastardization of religion. And, when I stood up and gave a speech reclaiming my own Christian identity a couple of months ago, this was about this horrific abuse of religion and inflicting it on others. Yes. It is the views of such a horrific minority of people. Religious freedom in this country does not mean you get to inflict your religious views on others. It means the freedom to practice your own religion without fear of prosecution. But beyond that, you know what else isn't mentioned in the Constitution? Women. This is an assault on our freedoms. This is an assault on our identities. And right now, the Supreme Court is not going to save us. The Congress is not going to save us. States and state legislatures are the front lines and the last line of defense. They have sent this to the states, and that is where we all have to focus our energy and our effort to take our freedoms back.